Board. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to work on lesson 8, which covers the vector component of Photoshop. So for those of you who have experience with Adobe Illustrator, that's precisely what you're doing in here. You're working with a pen tool and you're working with shapes. And all of those can be found over here to the left. Here is the pen tool. Actually, the type tool falls under that category because those the fonts are adjustable in size, and depending on the resolution of your screen or your file, I should say, will determine the resolution of the fonts. It's not the same as working with images. And here are your selection tools here. There's the path selection and the direct selection tool. And here is the shape tool here. And we're going to work with a custom shape. That's what you see in the lower left-hand corner. This is the finished version. And we're going to go through a practice today working with a pen tool. And as I said, for those of you who have experience with Adobe Illustrator, this will be kind of a review for you. But if you'll notice in the layers panel, if I turn off hue saturation down here, you can see that it just looks like a bunch of oranges. But when I turn hue saturation back on, it looks like we have a series of oranges with a lemon. And it's a simple adjustment. But what we're going to do, and again, if we look at paths, it's the tab to the right of that. You can see that we have a path that follows the outline of our center orange. Okay, so it's just another way for us of making a selection. You can use this to make a path, or you can use it to make a shape layer. And we'll talk about the difference between the two in just a minute. So let's start with a practice start session here. And this is what it's supposed to look like when we're done. You're just supposed to create a path, nothing more. So when you're using the pen tool, this probably won't take us an hour today. We'll probably get done much sooner. So if you have questions, please let me know. So let me zoom in so we can see a little bit more clearly. When you're working with a pen tool, to make a straight line, you do the following. And I don't like looking at the little icon of the pen tool. So I put caps lock on and I see the crosshairs, and that works a little bit better for me. So to create a straight line, you click and then you move the mouse and then you click again. There's your straight line. And then you go back, and if you use the selection tool or the path selection tool, now I can go ahead and I can move that path wherever I want, and I can stroke the path with a brush, or I can do whatever I want with it. Okay, so that's a simple straight line. If you want, the rule applies similar to what we've done with other things in Photoshop, that if I want to make for example, a perfect vertical line, then I would click and I would hold down the shift key and I would click again, and it's perfectly vertical. And if I wanted one at 45 degrees or I wanted one at that's horizontal, I would do the same. Hold down the shift key. Now, when you're making a curved path, it's a little bit different. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to select the pen tool again. And you'll notice that there's variations underneath the pen tool. We have the freeform pen tool, which I think is a waste. And I'll show you why right now. That as soon as I click here and I drag to make a path, okay, when I'm done, look at all the anchor points that it makes. All these little points that you see are probably way too many anchor points than what are needed. So I rarely, if ever, use it. I don't like it. Then if you want to use the curvature tool, which is basically taken from Illustrator, you can do that. If you want to add an anchor point, you can do that. If you want to subtract an anchor point, you can do that. And if you want to convert an anchor point from a corner point to a curve point, you can use this one, or vice versa. And so we'll do that. I'll show you how each of those works. But those are variations that are underneath the pen tool. So I just want the pen tool for right now. I don't want the freeform tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click, and then I'm going to click and drag to this point here. And notice when I do that, I get these little handles that come out. And then when I do, it curves the path. And then I can click on point C, and then let me undo that. I'm going to click and drag again to continue the curve. And then I continue again to point D, and I click like so. And that completes the curved path. So that's how that works. And when I'm done, I go back to the selection tool and I'm done. Now, this gets a little bit more complicated. We want to create something like an S curve or a sine wave. So again, I select the pen tool, and I click here at point A, I click at point B, and before I release the mouse, I drag to this little dot here. And then I do the same again here. I click on point C and click and drag a little bit until I get there. And then I click and drag again until I get a nice smooth curve. Now, I would do this a little bit differently, but I'm following the instructions in the book. Okay, and it follows the path pretty closely. And if you need to make adjustments, and I think I do, I don't like how this is turned out. Notice that it doesn't follow it very accurately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch from the path selection tool to the direct selection tool. And when I do, I can come over where each of these anchor points are, and I can move them about. So this path is editable. And then when I click and I drag over the little tangents or the little handles, that allows me to adjust that. So I can, and typically I adjust the anchor points first to get them into position. And then once they are in position, okay, then I adjust the tangent handle. That's what I call it, to make sure that it's nice and smooth. Now, you'll notice that when we, let me go ahead and deselect this right now. And I'm going to come back to the pen tool again. And when I do, you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, by default, we had path selected. Typically, what is selected by default is shape. Now, let me show you the difference. That when you select shape, it will create an entirely new layer. Just like type, when you use type, it creates an entirely new layer for you. So if I click and I move the mouse and I click, and it's going to use the foreground color to fill this, and I can create a shape. And when I click back on the point that the starting point, then it creates a closed path. Now I can come back with the tools that allow me to vary this. I can click back in here, and let's say I want to turn one of these corner points into a curved point. So now I can click on that. And let me click here. I want to click and drag, and now that curves the path. Now what I can do if I want to change that back to a corner point, I go back on the path and I click again, and it changes it to a corner point. Now I did change this one to a corner point. If you wish to add an anchor point, then you use one of the tools underneath, or you to add it, which is this one here. Or if you want to delete, you use this one here. So let's start by adding a point, and you move anywhere along the path. And when you see the little plus sign, you just go ahead and click. So I can move anywhere along here, and you can add as many anchor points as you want. The key to using this, I think, is, and this would be true in Illustrator too, is that use as few points as you have to. The fewer points, the better. The more points you use, you kind of set yourself up for an irregular kind of curve. So now I can go ahead and I can take with the direct selection tool, and I can move any of these points wherever I want, like so, and see how by default was a curve point, and I can move that out. And that's curved, and I can click here, and that's curved. I can move this out like so, and that's curved. So you can make any number of very complex paths. Now, the last shape that we're going to make in this starting exercise here is a little bit more complicated. We're going to go from straight paths to curved paths, and from curved paths back to straight paths again, corners. So I'm going to select the selection tool, make sure that this is selected, and hit the delete key to get rid of that. Okay. Now I'm going to go back, and let's try again. Let's click here. Let me click here and make sure that I have my working path selected. And I'm just going to use, and typically it's kind of like making a selection when you use the path here. Okay, hold on one second. I have a question from Grace. To turn in the assignments, no, you do not email them to me. You submit them by uploading them to the shared folder that we have in Google Drive. And make sure that you upload the original Photoshop file, so with all of the layers and any adjustment layers that you've used and that sort of thing. So that's how that's done. Okay. Okay. So back to this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the pen tool again. Make sure that I select the pen tool, not add anchor point. And I'm just going to go around clockwise. You can go around clockwise or counterclockwise, whichever works best for you. But you can't go in a random fashion. You have to go in successive kind of sequential order. So I'm going to click here. Let's hold down the shift key because I want it to be perfectly horizontal. There we go. And do the same here. I want this to be perfectly vertical. Now notice that I'm making a shape and I forgot to turn it back. So I need to undo. I need to do that. And I'm going to go back again. So if you want a shape layer, you might switch from fill to stroke, which is what we're going to do the next go around. And then when you're done, you can change the color of the fill and the stroke if you wish. But if you start with a fill, then it covers up your path and it makes it difficult for you to see what's going on. So I forgot to switch back. So I'm going to go back to path again. And let's do that again. Paths do not save on a separate layer. They are saved in their own area here under the paths. So let's click again, hold down the shift key to make sure that it's horizontal, click again, hold down the shift key, click again, and then I'm going to click and drag to this point so that you can see that it curves. And then I'm going to click and drag again to this point. You can see that it curves nicely. And then when I just click here, it changes from a curve point to a corner point. And then when I go back to the beginning here and I click, it finishes it all. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, if I wanted to stroke this path with a stroke or a brush, that would be kind of cool. So we could select a brush, and I don't want that to be 100 pixels, but let's pick one that's a little bit smaller, maybe 20 pixels, that will work for us. And stroke it with black. So now what I can do is I'll pull this tab off here. And you can see that there are options for us at the bottom. I can go ahead and I can fill this with pixels. I can stroke the path with a brush, or I can create from here, I can load the path as a selection like so. And that's what we're going to be doing in a minute. So I'm going to deselect. I don't want to do that at the moment. Let's bring that back. There we go. But what if I want to fill this with the brush stroke. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it used the background color. So I don't want that. So let's switch again. Let me try this again. And no, I have eraser selected. I don't know why I did that. Let's go back to brush. There we go. So now with that selected, I'll go ahead and I'll working path. I want to, there, stroke path with brush. There you go. So if you wanted something that looked, you know, free form or freehand drawn, that looked a little bit more, have more texture and a little bit more interesting, you can do that. But notice how precise it is as it follows that path. Pretty cool. So that's how that works. Now, if I want to change this to a shape, I would have to do this again. I'd have to make this again. So let me do that since I believe we have the time to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete the path. So I'm going to select it and delete it. But this time I'm going to switch from path to shape. And so that I don't cover up my path, I'm going to switch. I'm going to make the stroke nothing. So I'll click on here. I'll say that I don't want a fill, but I do want for the stroke, I'll make it green just for the heck of it. And now I can come here. And it is a 1 point stroke. So if we want, I'll leave it 1 point, but why not? I'll increase it a little bit to maybe 3, just so we can see it a little bit better or close to it. So if I click and I click and I click, hold down the shift key and I click and I click again, and then I click and drag. And once again, I click and drag. And then once again, I click and then I click, close the path. But now if I switch, if I either simply add a fill, I can do so. And you'll notice it's a stroke, a slightly different color. So if I want the outer perimeter to be a different color, I can. Or if I want it to be none, I can do that. And again, what's nice about using shape layers like this is that you don't need to worry about the resolution of the image because it's defined by mathematics. So you can make this any size you want, big or small. If you decide later on that you do not like the color of it, we can always go back to the shape layer and I can double click on it and I can pick a different color. So let's pick red or burnt orange or whatever. I click and it should, I picked the wrong one. So let's use this one. No, I picked the wrong one. So this is the one that I want. There we go. So double click here. Let's change it to orange. Nice bright orange, and you can see that it changes it. So this is can be edited indefinitely, similar to text. It can be edited indefinitely. So for example, notice the little glitch that I have in my curve right here. I can always come back with the direct selection tool. I can select an anchor point here and select any one of these. I can come back and I can edit it ever so slightly to improve the look of it. And when I'm done, deselect, and subtle little changes, little improvements are really, really very nice. Okay, so that's our test for that. So now what we're going to do is that's our practice. And we're going to go back to our start file here. And again, they provided for us a guide path that we're going to turn off eventually. And I don't want this to be a shape layer. I want this to be simply a path, because we're going to convert that path to a selection. And then what we'll do with the selection is that we can now affect with the background layer selected, we can go ahead and we can affect, there we go, we can affect the the underlying color of our orange. So let's go ahead and start with the pen tool. And I'm just going to follow their guidelines here. So we're going to start here. And I'm going to click here. And I'm going to drag. And then I'm going to click point C and drag. And then after I'm done dragging, I release the mouse. And then I click again and I drag. And when I'm done, I again click and drag. And then I release the mouse and I click and drag, and then I click, and then I click and I drag, and then I click and I drag, and then I click here, and then I click here, and I click again, and I drag to create that curved path. Click and drag, click and drag. And then when I'm all done, and I go back to the starting point, notice how the cursor changes. It goes back to the pen nib with a little circle in the lower right-hand corner that lets me know that it's a closed path. So now I have my path, and I can go back to the path selection tool to see what that looks like. And you can see that it's off a little bit. So I can come back here with the direct selection tool, and that's not a bad idea. And I can click on here a little, oh, I don't want to do that. Got to make sure that it's deselected. Come back again. And I want to select an individual anchor point and move it into position. And if I need to zoom in a little bit, then zoom in a little bit. If I need to adjust the little handles a little bit, then go ahead until it matches the underlying. And that's what I'm looking for, is the underlying shape to make sure it's a pretty close match. And I think I'm close to being good to go. So now what I can do is I can go ahead and I can go back to the path selection tool. And now what I want to do with this shape selected is I'm going to select this third button over here, which allows me to load path as selection. And now what I can do with that selection going is that I can select the background layer, and we can go ahead and we can add an adjustment layer. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add, in this particular instance, we're going to add hue saturation. And I'm going to change the hue. And I think they wanted us to change it to like, yeah, 16, 13, something like that. And now it changes the underlying image without affecting anything else. Now, what you have to realize though, when I'm done, when I deselect and I deselect the path, so let's go back to the path, and I turn off that guide layer. Okay, and let's go back to the paths. Let's select the path, and I want to deselect that. So let me go, that's the shape layer. Sorry, I didn't want that. Let's select the guide path. That's turned off. There we go. So it's all turned off now. So we don't see any of that. If I turn it back on, it brings that back up. If I select this, that will bring that up. And I don't want any of those. So the next thing that we're going to do in here is we're going to use a shape layer, but we're going to use some of the, over here, we're going to use some of the default images that they have. Now, if we look at the finished one, and I need to do that, they want that a nice bright yellow. So let me come back to the starting file that we've been working with. And if I change from path to shape layer, and I make sure that the fill is a nice bright yellow in here. Let's select that nice bright yellow. Is it the same as the book? I don't know. And then I hold down the Shift key and I click and I drag. Okay. Notice that I have the stroke from what I had done before. Well, let me go ahead and select none for stroke, and let's select the fill, and let's select that yellow. And there you have it. Okay. So now when I deselect, and I come back with the selection tool and I deselect, I have that nice image here. And if I want to transform it, I should hit Shift key to transform. Make sure that I have that selected. Hold on here. I didn't want that. I'm sorry, it's not Shift T. What am I thinking? It's Command T. And we are going to use Shift T in a minute. I don't want any text. So let me pull this up so I can see a little bit better. There we go. So I'm going to get rid of that text layer. It's not Shift T. It's Command T. So it's make sure that that layer is selected. Command T. There we go. And we can make this as big or as small as we wish. Oh, come on. Let's go back to edit. Here, let me deselect, cancel. Make sure that I have it selected here. Let's select the layer again, make sure that it's selected. And, oh, I have a white, I might have a white stroke. So let me double click on here, see what I have. And let's see. Yeah, I have a yellow fill. And that should do it. We should be good. And no stroke. So there we go. Why it's turning out like that, I don't know. But anyway, let's go ahead. Make sure that the path selection is selected. And Command T. Now I should be able to go over the corner. There we go. Hold down the Shift key and constrain the proportions. There we go. So you can make this as big or as small as you like so. And then if you decide to use some text, and that's what we're supposed to do for here, since they didn't provide it for Citrus Lane Farms. So I'm going to go back over here and let's put caps lock on. And I'm going to select the type tool. And I'm just going to use horizontal type. And I'm going to use Myriad Pro just for the heck of it. And just click here. Okay. And type layer, I want citrus, oh, come on. Why is that doing that? Let's throw that away. Let's switch back to white and try again. There we go. Click. There we go. Citrus Lane Farms. Now I can highlight everything using the text tool. And from up here, or I can bring up, I can use the properties panel, and we can change the size of it like so. And I can come back to the move tool, and we can move this wherever we want, put it in a position. And if we don't like the size of it, I can change it again. And there you have it. That's pretty much it. Took me less than an hour to do this, about a half an hour. So some of the other things that maybe we can look at. Let me think a moment. So I'm going to pause the recording for a minute. So I repeat, if you want to change the shape layer here, and I want to change the color of that I want it to be much brighter, you know. Yellow, I can do that like so. So you can change this. If I need to add an outline, I can add an outline and I'm good to go. So typically for creating really precise outlines of your object, you can use the pen tool. Now, in addition to that, this is what I wanted to show you guys. Something that I like doing, remember I said I always like to get in the habit of copying the background first so I don't accidentally work on that. So if I hit Command J, I make a copy of it. And if I need to, I turn off the background image. Now watch what happens. We'll get very close. It won't be precise. But this is what I'm saying is that the pen tool is a useful tool in here. But if you want to create a really precise or a quicker selection of this, we could probably use the rectangular selection tool here, or the one that we have here. And I'm going to go over that like so and let go. And notice that it made a pretty darn good selection. There's some glitches in here that I can go back and correct. So if I want to, I could use the polygonal lasso tool to add to or subtract. And I could come back and we could start at the top. And let's say up here, I wanted to add to this selection. So I could go ahead and I could hold down the Shift key. And this might be, if you don't like using the pen tool, this might be a quicker way of doing that. And come back in here like so. And I've added to it. And if I want to subtract from the selection, hold down the Option key. And I can click here. And I can click across. And click up here. Come back down where I started. And I can remove from the selection. And again, I can come back over here. Hold down the Shift key to add. Click. And if you would rather use just the lasso tool instead, that would be a good one. Or the, you can use the, what else do we have here? We have the magnetic lasso tool. So if that works better for you, we can hold down the Shift key again, and I can click and drag and maybe get even a better selection. There you go. That's working much better, actually. So this may have taken me the same amount of time or less time. I don't know. And it works pretty good. Notice where we're missing from here. So let's go ahead and hold down the Shift key. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add to my selection. Come back up and go inside the current selection. Double click to add that. Now, when I'm all done with this, we still have some of the same options that we've had before in other lessons that I can select, and I can mask this, and I can modify the selection from here. And that's not a bad idea. So if I click here, notice that it shows me what the mask looks like. So I can come over here and we can show from here. If I want to see this on a black background like so, or if I want to see it on a white background, that's not a bad selection. Now notice how ragged it is. So what I can do is I can come back here and we can use Smart Radius, okay? And then I can also smooth this a little bit. I can take some of that out of there and we can smooth it, and we should be able to see. Let's crank this up a little bit and see what we have. Whoops, I don't want that too far. Let's go back. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. And then I can also, if I want to shift the edge in a little bit or out, I usually shift it in just a little bit to make sure that I've covered everything. I can do that. And then when I'm done, I can go ahead and I can take this selection and I can, as we've done before in lesson 6, I can create a new layer with layer mask. So there we go. There's our new layer. Now I can turn this one back on, and now I'm working totally non-destructively. I can take this one, turn this back on, and there I have my selection. So now I've isolated the lemon, or that center image, from the background here. And if I can turn it off at any time, and turn this one off. And that's just another way of working. Okay. Are there any other questions? No? That's all I wanted to cover today, is lesson 8. Next, well, what I could do today is we can start talking about the movie poster assignment. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, okay, I wasn't planning on doing this today, but I could do that. Let's come back here and let's go back. I'm looking up here on my other screen so I can. Come on, there we go. So I'm going to bring this in here. Now, I need to know from all of you, can everybody see this? Okay. Anybody not? Can see my This Week in Class? And if I go to Kirk's classes, I go back up here to my home page for Kirk's classes. I can scroll up and we can look at some of the movie posters that you can look, that we'll be doing. Where are we? Here we go. So the next assignment after the postcard assignment is to do a movie poster. It's a very specific kind of movie poster. It's an autobiographical movie poster. The size will be 11 by 17. That's tabloid size, so that's vertical. And it will also, the subject of it is about you. If you were to make a movie about your life, what would the title of that movie be? And what image or images would you use to convey a particular moment in your life, or way you feel about your life? Or it doesn't have to be all-inclusive. It doesn't have to be comprehensive. It can be very specific. So what Isaac chose to do here is that he is part of a punk band, and he felt that was an important part of his life. So that was what he chose to do, was to go ahead and to make a movie poster about that. Oscar Bohaka, family life for him was very important. Now, did he use any images of himself? No, that's not him. He chose to use clip art, and he decided to do a montage, collage of images, some in silhouette, some knocking out part of an image here, and then putting an image within an image, and then adding another background image to his movie poster. Now, 2 additional things that you need to be concerned about is that number 3, actually, is that one is that you have to title your movie and design that title. So that's type choice. You can use any number of layer effects that we've talked about so far. You can explore, if you want, the 3D effect. But you'll notice that his title design, that's in particular why I thought that was noteworthy. That it has, he deformed the N at the very end and chose to put a gradation within the type itself. That's the second thing. That's the first thing. So you need a title of the movie. You also need to put the credits. Now, the credits you can get from anywhere. You can do a simple Google search and look for movie credit images. And they come in white and they come in black, and that's generally all that you need. And generally, if you find a PNG file with a transparent background, then you're good to go. So you'll need to do that, okay? So as I said, you need a title, you need credits, and I said there was a third thing, but maybe not. This one was really powerful, I thought. This one was by one of my best students ever, but he was a ringer for the class. He already had a degree from Cal State Long Beach in painting. So he knew how to draw, he knew how to paint, he had an understanding of perspective and color theory and that sort of thing. And he came back to Cerritos simply because he wanted to learn computer graphics. He wanted to be able to use Illustrator, Photoshop, web design, and that sort of thing. So here's the one that he did about his life story. This one was not about that. So Kevin, if you're still there, this might be something that you want to do, is that Carlos Gil, a couple of semesters ago, we decided to do a public service poster. And so he chose to do one on global warming. And again, all of this was clip art that he composited together to make it look like New York City was flooded and there is Noah's Ark with all the animals in New York. And it was, again, you need to devise a title for it. Take action, sea levels are rising. I thought that was a really good approach. It didn't hit you over the head to say that it was global warming, but it was clearly a poster about global warming. Okay, so those are some of the movie posters that we have as an example for all of you. Okay. And I did say, I know what it is. The third thing that I wanted to tell you is that the resolution should be a minimum of 200 pixels per inch. Ideally, it should be 300 pixels per inch. That was the third thing. So you need to devise a title and design it. You need to include credits, and the size needs to be 11 by 17, which is tabloid size. And the resolution needs to be between 200 and 300 pixels per inch. That was all. Okay. So we can go back up here. So are there any questions from you about, let's see, we have here, we have one in the chat. Okay, no. Okie doke. So that should do it. Yeah, if everybody is good to go, then that's all we need for today. And so your next lesson is lesson 8. Make sure that you've turned in the others. So, you know, we have plenty of time, but by the end of the semester, we will be doing through lesson 12. So you need to make sure that you get all lessons done 1 through 12 and posted in Google Drive. And then to restate how I want your projects to be turned in, I want the original Photoshop file that you've created with all of the layers, including adjustment layers and any masks you've made and that sort of thing. And I want that original Photoshop file to be uploaded to your Google Drive folder as well, the one that we created inside our shared folder. Okay. So if there aren't any more questions, that's it for today. I will, if you want, you're welcome to leave. We're good for today. I think I've taken roll for everybody that's here. And then I will go ahead and I'll stop recording, and that will be it for today. And probably I will talk about lesson 9 on Monday. We'll see, because we're kind of ahead of the game in terms of lessons. I might have a movie that I'll want to share with all of you. Okay. So question. Yeah, the postcard is due by Sunday. But again, as I said, because the class is taught asynchronously, if you need more time, take more time. But that just means that it's taking away from time from the next assignment. That's ideally when I would like it to be turned in. Okay. So I will probably be grading midterm to make sure that these are done. And we're pretty close to that. This is the 6th week. And so I'll probably another week or so, I'll grade the postcard. And then by midterm, maybe a little bit after midterm, I will grade the movie poster. Okay, so goodbye for now. Have a good weekend. Enjoy working and finishing up your projects and working on the lessons. And that's it for today. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording, and it will be posted very soon. Okay, within an hour probably. Okay, so I'm going to pause recording and say goodbye.